You are listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast with Buck Joffrey. Get ready to change your life.
Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast, coming to you from Montecito, California. And before I begin, I just remind you here real quick that this show has a website associated with it called wealthformula.com. Wealthformula.com is where you go if you want additional resources. You want to sign up for our various lists and clubs like the Accredited Investor Club. Lots of opportunities there as well. So go check it out, wealthformula.com. Now, this week, I'm going to talk a little bit about asset protection. That's what this show's all about. You see, the two most common mistakes, I talk to a lot of new investors, and the most common mistakes I see relate to not thinking about asset protection and not thinking about estate planning. Now, not thinking about estate planning, sort of understandable, although sort of not. I mean, death is a topic that many try to avoid, right? So some are even superstitious that if they set up an estate plan, then it's going to trigger their demise somehow. So I can kind of understand, although not really, why that's an issue. But, others just don't think about it at all. And then there's asset protection, right? That's the other thing. Oh, wait, before I get to asset protection, let me give you a little hint on the estate planning. We've done a bunch of shows on this. You should go back and listen. But at the very minimum, you're going to need a trust. At the very least, you're going to need a will and a living trust. So that's the bare minimum. But you should go back and listen to that as well. Now, asset protection is a little bit different. I think, ultimately people just don't have an idea that they need it, especially doctors that spend so much of their life broke as students that, there was nothing to go after in the first place. And so they never have to think about it. And all of a sudden they start making some money. And once you start making some money and once you start investing, regardless of what you invest in, you've got to do something when it comes to asset protection. Now, let me explain why. Now, as a real estate owner, real estate is great in many ways, but if you're owning real estate on your own, let's say you've got an apartment building or, duplex or whatever you're renting out, you've got two enemies to defend against. The first one is the tenant who slips and falls. The second is the guy with the broken bones your kid may have hit driving your new car with your friends. Either one would love to get at something valuable that you own in retribution and probably a little greed. That's where asset protection comes in. And here's the thing. If you set up good asset protection from the beginning, the irony of it all is that you may not get sued at all in the first place. A lot of this legal stuff is optics, right? The more I've been in this world, the more I realize that the whole legal system is optics. It's kind of crazy to me, but that's the way it works. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. Sometimes it's about who's got more money. And if there's a lawsuit or not depends on a lot on whether or not somebody has any assets that are actually at risk. In other words, if you put up a lot of walls and traps in your asset protection, you're less likely to get sued in the first place because your estate will start looking a little bit like a turnip to any attorney working on contingency, that is. And that's what you want. You want to not look like you're an easy, juicy target. You want to look like a big mess. And these guys in contingency, these lawyers, they're basically out there looking for a piece of the pie. But if there's no pie, or if that pie is going to take an inordinate amount of time to get through and potentially not get through, they're not going to take the case. So that's something else to consider. Now, asset protection can be fairly simple, but it does need to be done right. And so therefore, my guest on Wealth Formula Podcast this week is Garrett Sutton. He's a guy who knows how to do this the right way. And he's also going to fill us in a little bit about investing in movies, which is kind of interesting as well. All of that once we come back from these messages. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, my guest on Wealth Formula Podcast is Garrett Sutton. He's a corporate attorney, asset protection expert, and best-selling author who's sold more than 1 million books to guide entrepreneurs and investors. He's the author of Scam Proof Your Assets, Real Estate Loopholes, Secrets of Successful Real Estate Investing, Own Your Own Corporation, and the latest, which is Fail Not Fail, which is something of interest, I think, to everyone on this particular program. Garrett, welcome back to Wealth Formula Podcast.
Thanks, Buck. Thanks for having me.
So, asset protection is kind of the topic that I think I want to cover first. And I want to go really basic here. And, for some people, and it's remarkable to me how many people don't think about asset protection, even people who are, making hundreds of $1,000s a year or maybe even, million plus. How does an asset protection plan aid an investor?
Well, when you start out, you're going to put your money into a piece of real estate, for example. And, that money is exposed. If you have a tenant that sues and the property's held in your individual name, they have a claim against you personally. And not only can they get the property, but they can get all of your other assets that are in your name. So we don't want that. We live in a litigious society. People sue each other all the time. So when you buy that first piece of real estate, you want to take title in the name of a limited liability company, an LLC. So that if the tenant sues, they can get what's inside the LLC. That's their claim, but they can't get beyond the walls of the LLC after your other personal assets. So asset protection is very important. Now, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, people didn't worry about this, but we have a litigious society now where attorneys can advertise, attorneys can collect 30 to 40% of what they get in the courtroom or through a settlement. So there's an incentive out there for people to sue. And you and I, Buck, aren't going to change that system. We just need to use the tools within the system to protect ourselves, which is LLCs and corporations.
Now, real estate is a major part of this show and the people who listen to this show, real estate investing. When you think about asset protection, if you could you sort of compare the types of asset protection requirements that you might have for real estate versus, other types of investments?
Well, for real estate, certainly you are dealing with the public, you're renting to people, you just need to be protected. And of course, I always recommend that people have insurance. That's your first line of defense. And you also want to have a property that's habitable. I mean, you don't want to put out a property where someone's going to get injured. That's not what you want to do. So, but beyond that, beyond insurance and taking care of your properties, you need to have these limited liability companies on title to the real estate. So it's very important. Now, another type of asset would be a brokerage account, right? Stocks, bonds, crypto. You're not going to get sued by holding shares in Ford Motor Company, right? You're not going to, it's not like a tenant is going to sue you for that, but you could get in a car wreck, and in a car wreck, someone wants to go after your assets. And so you're better off having that brokerage account in an LLC in a strong state like Wyoming or Nevada, where someone after the car wreck is trying to sue you and they want to get at your personal assets. By having those brokerage assets in a separate LLC, you're much better protected than having them in your individual name.
So sometimes the way I kind of think about this is like three bubbles right in a row with like say, your assets in the middle and it's being attacked from both ends. It's being attacked, or you're in the middle, say, and your assets are being attacked by the people in real estate who might, own it, trip and fall. But then there's also the people who your personal injury may result in some sort of litigation. So you're trying to protect from both ends when you own real estate in some. However, a lot of people own real estate in limited partnerships. Now, in that situation, the main danger there is obviously car crash and losing that type of ownership. So in that case, what do you typically recommend? Is it like a holding company, LLC, or something like that?
Yeah. So, limited partnership is fine for owning real estate. We just need to know that the general partner, if they're an individual, is personally liable for everything that happens within the limited partnership. So you need to set up a second entity, an LLC perhaps, to be the general partner. So the difference between the LP and the LLC is to be completely protected within the LP. You need two entities, one to be the limited partnership and one to be the general partner. With the LLC, everyone's protected. You just need one entity. But you're right, Buck, there are two types of attack. There's the inside attack where the tenant sues over a condition on the property. Then there's the outside attack where you get in a car wreck. It has nothing to do with the real estate, but they want to get at your assets. And so they're suing from the outside. And that's where the Wyoming LLC comes into play because it's very protective. The person suing you can only get the charging order, which is a lien on distributions. Unlike the state of California, for example, with a California LLC, someone can pierce through and force a sale of the property. With Wyoming, the state of Wyoming goes, no, it doesn't work that way here. You've got to wait for distributions to be made.
Right.
And the attorney on a contingency fee doesn't want to wait around to, monitor distributions. So you're much better off having good insurance, an umbrella policy of insurance that the attorneys can get at, and then having these LLCs that the attorneys are not good at getting through. So there's just a structure that we need to put into place because, again, we live in this litigious society.
So you mentioned it a couple of times already in terms of the good states to have LLCs in. One of the challenges, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I live in California, is that even if I have a Wyoming entity, I have to register in the state of California. At that point, I'm playing by their rules, right?
Not necessarily. If we have a system where we hold the Wyoming certificate in the state of Wyoming, so someone's suing you in California, they claim they have personal jurisdiction over you, but the actual certificate has been certificated in the state of Wyoming, and Wyoming law applies at that point. So we do have strategies to deal with the state of California. We have to do more planning for California, Buck, than any other state or the IRS.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I that's something I have not really found a solution to. Because I have Wyoming LLCs myself. For the most part, all of them are Wyoming, and but like when I buy property here in California, in the state of California, it just seems like everybody tells me, well, yeah, you could have it in that entity, but it's not going to help you. So,
well, no, there are ways to do it. But if you hold title to real estate in California, use a California LLC. That's where you're doing business. Right. Then you have that California LLC owned by a Wyoming LLC.
Got it.
And that's the good way to do it.
Understood.
Now, California will say, well, geez, the Wyoming LLC, you're managing it from California, qualified to do business in California. And, we do that because, the penalty for not doing that is $12,000. So we don't want to put our clients through that.
Right. Let's talk a little bit more about, we're kind of talking about this corporate veil thing over and over without necessarily kind of diving into detail. And that is the topic, I guess, of your new book, right? Veil, not fail.
Got to hold it up, right?
Yeah, there you go. Veil, not fail. And I'm sure as it's available everywhere. It's a part of the Kiyosaki series. It looks like it's a purple book, right?
Right.
And let's talk a little bit about that. What are the things that people need to know? First of all, let's talk about what is piercing the corporate veil, and then and we can follow up with some questions on that.
Okay, good. So piercing the corporate veil is a situation in which you have a corporation or an LLC, and someone sues that corporation or LLC. They have a claim against it. They want to get what's inside the entity, but the entity has no money. The entity, there's a judgment, but either people have transferred assets out of the entity improperly, or it just doesn't have any assets. And piercing the veil refers to the situation where, with that judgment and the corporation having no money, the person with the judgment can say, all right, well, the corporation has no money, but I'm going to pierce through the corporation and go after the owners of the corporation. I want to get at their personal monies to pay this claim. And it's a pretty dramatic situation for you to, you've set up this entity to be for protection. And then all of a sudden, someone is barging through and going after your personal assets. And Buck, this happens in 50% of all cases. Mm-hmm. People are able to pierce the veil, go through the corporation or LLC and reach someone's personal assets. Now, why does this happen? Well, it's because they didn't follow the corporate formalities. Right? They didn't set up their entity properly. They didn't have minutes. They didn't have the stock certificates. They didn't pay the state. They had a personal account for their business. They commingled personal and business monies. So there are a number of factors that can lead to the veil being pierced. And so that's why I wrote the book. It's the most overlooked issue in all of asset protection, is the ability of someone to pierce through the corporation and get at your personal assets.
You talked about a few of the more common things, but what are, when you talk about people commingling funds or loans and transfers, what do you see the most often that really weaken that corporate structure?
Well, just failing to follow the corporate formalities. When you set up a corporate charter, you're making a deal with the state that you're going to follow these rules so you can stay protected. One is failing to pay the corporate filing fee. Right. If you don't pay the state their fees, California, it's $800 a year. But if you don't pay those fees to the state says we're going to, default you, right, and your corporation will no longer provide protection. And so, you really want to pay the state every year so you can stay protected. The state says, look, you have to have a meeting once a year. It's not that big a requirement, but if you fail to have these meetings, and this also applies to LLCs, there are a lot of promoters out there saying you don't need meetings for LLCs. The courts say otherwise. And plus, how can you run a business without ever having a meeting? I don't want to be in front of a jury saying I never had a meeting for 10 years. Business doesn't work that way. So you have to do the annual meeting. You have to have a separate bank account. You have to file separate tax returns. That's part of the deal of getting the corporate charter, is following the rules. And if you don't follow the rules, in 50% of all cases, they pierce through the veil and get at your personal assets.
So obviously that's the bad scenario. And but a lot of times it doesn't really get there, right? Because if you have a good structure in place, part of what you're really trying to do is make yourself, repellent to lawsuits. Because as you mentioned, a lot of these attorneys are coming after you with contingencies. And if it looks really tough to get at your assets, you may not have to deal with the lawsuit at all. There could be a settlement.
Correct. You want to put up as many real or perceived roadblocks as possible. So having title to the property in LLC is good. Having Wyoming or Nevada holding entities for your other LLCs is good. Having an umbrella policy of insurance and enough insurance on your real estate is good. We want to take these steps and to dissuade the attorneys who are on a contingency, who have an incentive to sue. We want to dissuade them from ever thinking about suing you.
If you have property right now, if somebody's listening to this and oh gosh, I shouldn't have put that in my name. What can you do, after you've already invested? Is it difficult to move things into other structures? Does that create any weakening of that corporate structure? Just curious on that, because I know a lot of people probably are thinking, well, gosh, now what do I do?
So what you do is you set up the LLC, you transfer title with a grant deed or a warranty deed from your name into the name of the LLC. As long as you haven't been sued or threatened with a lawsuit, you are able to make these transfers. The problem arises when you've been sued. Right. You can't put the seatbelt on after the accident. You have to have the entity, the LLC, set up on title to the property, then if you ever get sued later, you are protected by that LLC.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about something that else that you've been involved with, which sounds like a lot of fun. So you've kind of gotten yourself into the movie business. Tell how did that happen?
Well, I've always been interested in movies, and when you're younger, to get into the movie business just is kind of a dream. It's not something you do, right? Yeah. I went to law school. I became a lawyer. Yeah. But my son is he's coming into the practice. He'll be taking over, and I've become associated with some really good people in the movie business, and we're starting to make documentaries. We're in production on 3 documentaries right now. We're going to be doing a feature-length kids movie in Kentucky in May. It's a good business. There's a great need for content. One of these documentaries, I look at it like a duplex. I mean, it's just something that can provide revenue for a long period of time. As well, there's some great tax advantages, Buck. Section 181 of the tax code, you get to write off the cost of production in the year of production. So you get an immediate write-off.
So that's effectively like, in real estate lingo, it'd be like taking the 100% bonus depreciation in the first year. Yeah. Yep. But automatically, right? I mean, that's not, you're not having to go through some code that's going to expire tomorrow or something like that.
Well, this code does expire, but they always bring it back. Uh-huh. All right. So it's good for the next couple of years. Also, if you film in a state like Kentucky or Georgia, they have a 30% rebate. And so you make a $400,000 movie and you get a rebate of $120,000. Right. So with the tax write-offs and the rebates, your risk goes from 100% to 40%. And so there are advantages to film production, and I'm learning them.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting.
So talk about, if you would, for people who've never, invested in that kind of thing, how does it work typically? How do investors, first of all, are most movies are they mostly syndicated, types of things where you've got somebody raising capital and, you make a movie and then you send it out to see how it does? Is that the way most movies work?
Yeah, there's syndication, and then you also have funds that come together that are in the business of constantly making movies. Yes, money is raised from individuals through syndications. Individuals come together through an LLC. 5 people come together through an LLC. So yeah, it's just like real estate.
Yeah. And then when people get you were talking about sort of residual income. So how does that work when you're invested in a movie? So it's just, is there ownership of that for a period of time, forever or whatever, and then
Well, our deals are the investors get all the write-offs, right? Mm-hmm. And they get their money back plus 15%. And then from there on out, it's typically 50+% to the investors, 50% to the people involved in making the film. But the investors get all of the write-offs, all of the tax refunds, and their money back plus 15%.
Well, I guess my bigger question is how do the movies actually function in terms of where the money comes from the box office, right? And then it's, purchased by somebody else. Maybe it goes on Netflix. I'm just curious about how the streams of revenue work.
Well, the streams of revenue, it used to be the theaters, but that has changed significantly. And now a lot of it is just through streaming, either a subscription service like Netflix, where they'll buy the movie from you, and you really don't get much information on how many people are watching it. So that's a problem with Netflix. You have these free ad-supported channels now, where you will get either a flat fee or you will get a percentage of the ad revenue. So there are new models that way coming out. So there's just a lot of it. It's an interesting time, Buck, in the movie business, because all these new models are coming forward because after the pandemic, people are not returning to the movie theaters.
Yeah, very fascinating stuff. That kind of business, is there asset protection type issues there that you need worrying about too? Like, somebody accidentally shooting somebody on the set or something like that. Not that would happen, but
I feel sorry for him. I can't believe that was intentional.
No, I'm sure it was.
I just really feel sorry there. But you have to have insurance. The investors are protected because we're going to use an LLC or an LP, and their loss is limited to the amount they invested. So with all the tax deductions, you are going to get some significant benefits in the first year. But in terms of asset protection, you're a passive investor in an LLC, so you're not exposed to any sort of risk.
Got it. Again, the book itself, the new book is called Fail Not Fail, available anywhere. It's Garrett Sutton. And Garrett, also tell us a little about some of your other resources. And I know, you have Corporate Direct as well. Maybe talk a little bit about that, all the things that you offer.
Great. Well, Corporate Direct is our main business. We set up and maintain corporations and LLCs in all 50 states. And maintain is one of the key words because you have to have that registered agent. We offer that service. You have to have the minutes done. We give you a book with all the templates on how to do it every year, but a lot of people don't do it. And so we offer a service whereby we will do the minutes for you. We offer a free 15-minute consultation. If you want to go to corporatedirect.com, you can sign up and talk to one of the incorporating specialists and, see if there's a fit, see what our fees are, see if we can help you. So that's our main business, is just helping people set up the LLCs and corporations to protect themselves in this litigious society.
Good stuff. And if they want to get in touch with you for anything else, like movies or whatever.
That's great. Yeah, they can go to Corporate Direct and just send me an email at the Corporate Direct. And, if you are interested, we'll send you the link to our website for the movies.
Fantastic. Garrett Sutton, thank you very much for being on Wealth Formula Podcast.
Thank you, Buck. Good to be with you again.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. And so, a lot of times people ask me kind of what my structure is, and I would consider my structure pretty bulletproof because I don't really own anything. That's the other, thing about asset protection is very helpful, that you can sometimes combine it with estate planning. So if you're planning to, leave all of your, assets to your children eventually, you can kind of just, start that early and get it done. Now you can continue to control, but, you don't have to own anything yourself. So, and frankly, this is kind of the way that I've found most high net worth, sophisticated folks go. They have their various family dynasty trusts, so on and so forth, stuff like that. But yeah, even within those trusts, I mean, as soon as you get out into that irrevocable trust space, it's not you at all anymore. But on top of that, you can start protecting the assets of the trust with other LLCs. It could be a holding company owned by the trust, and then LLCs below that. That's basically kind of what I do, because people want to know, what I do. But I don't think that's appropriate for everyone. I don't think it was appropriate for me, certainly a few years ago, when I was starting out. So anyway, that's what I got this week on Wealth Formula Podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. This is Buck Joffrey signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast. Visit us on the web at wealthformula.com. The information contained in this podcast are opinions, not fact. As always, consult your own financial team before making any investment. See you next time.